Hello and welcome to the Runners World podcast with just me, Ben Hobson. Rick Pearson has disappeared off to south of France for some reason. This week I am talking to elite orienteerer Ralph Street about this fascinating discipline within the world of running and why most, if not all runners, should be giving it a try. Once or twice during the record, Ralph's neighbours very kindly start doing some drilling, so on an occasion you might hear that, but it's very unlikely because I have meticulously edited it out. While I have you, just to offer a glimpse into the future of the Runners World podcast, we have some episodes coming up with the mountain goat of all time, Kilian Jornet, and a really fascinating group discussion around social media, the rise of Run Talk, and the general growth of influencers and the role they play in the narrative of running. So yeah, stay tuned for those. But for now, here is my chat all about orienteering with Ralph Street.
Guest of the week, here in the studio. Guest of the week, sometimes on the phone. Could be an athlete, could be a physio, or a complete unknown.
Our guest this week is a world-class orienteerer and a 31-minute 10K runner, Ralph Street. Welcome to the Runners World podcast.
Thank you very much.
For the uninitiated, and I include myself in this, can you tell us what orienteering actually is?
Orienteering is a sport where you navigate using a map between checkpoints, and the goal is to do it in the fastest possible time if you're trying to be an elite athlete, basically.
Got it. And so this is a running event at that level. This is really what it's all about.
Definitely. Yeah.
It's interesting. I think that a lot of people listening probably think of orienteering as sort of like plastic map wallets and sort of, you know, soggy rainy days out on the moors trying to find your point. But you're very much of this is running but with an added element.
Yes. I mean, a bit like if you compare it to football, you know, you've got your Sunday league and that does not look like the Premier League at all.
Yeah, I've got it. Right, absolutely. So how does it work then? What's the race format tend to be? Are we talking very set distances? Is it particular markers? I know that the course is basically as you can get there. So what are the determining factors in terms of an orienteering like event?
So there's two main differences in orienteering. There's forest orienteering and sprint orienteering. Sprint happens in a city generally, and forest happens out in the countryside, and within them you get different disciplines, and that's basically the length of time it takes to complete the course. So down to 6 minutes for the very shortest sprint stuff, up to 90-100 minutes for the longest stuff in the forest.
And so have you then set certain targets, like how many points do you have to get to? Is that always a standard, or does it vary from race to race?
It varies from race to race. You get given a map and it's got the numbers, and you collect them in order, or you visit them in order. And I don't know what a normal number is, 15 maybe, maybe up towards 30 for the most you'd have to find in a race.
Thinking about the sort of practicalities of how this works, what are the key skill sets then with orienteering that you need to have? I mean, obviously there's a map involved, and we'll talk about apps and GPS watches and how that sort of either hinders or helps, I'm not sure. But what are the key skill sets then for someone who wants to get into it? Is it the ability to read maps? Is that the sort of fundamentals?
Yes. If you keep getting lost, it will be difficult to complete the course, basically. Yeah. And whatever the story about the tortoise and the hare, like if the tortoise goes the right way the whole time and finds the control, it beats the hare who gets lost a lot.
I like this added element of just not being out and out speed and ability. I mean, well, it is ability because your map reading that comes into it, but you know, fundamentally you could beat someone technically faster at running than you by being a better map reader.
Definitely, yeah. And it gives you maybe it gives you like an extra challenge because it's your ability to read the map rather than, say, your physical shape on the day. So there's always small improvements that you can make basically the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can, if you feel like you're having an off day on the feet, you can really kind of like double down on the map stuff.
Yep.
and try and get a win another way.
Yeah.
There are the World Champs coming up in Edinburgh this summer. What do they have in store? What does that involve?
So this is a sprint World Champs. So we've got an individual sprint, which is about 15 minutes. We've got what's called a knockout sprint, which is a head-to-head race. Normally, orienteering is done as a time trial format. So with one person starting every minute or something, so you can't follow and you can't see anyone else. The knockout sprint is 6 people starting at the same time, and the first one back to the finish wins. And then there's a relay as well. So there are 3 different races.
What do you find personally? What's like the hard? Is the hour-long stuff with multiple? Is that harder than the sprint? What's in terms of when it comes to the elite level? When you're sort of like, what's your favourite way of orienteering?
I'm best at the sprint stuff. Mainly because I'm a faster runner on road surface than I am in tough Scandinavian forest.
Right, yeah.
But the sprint is maybe the hardest because the margins are so much smaller. A 5-second mistake in the sprint is a really big deal.
What do you think that regular runners is a sort of broad sweeping term, but what runners who do not do orienteering currently, what are the benefits that they could gain from doing a few of these events, or even just trying their hand at a bit of sort of point-to-point stuff?
To take a sort of scientific view, there's a lot of science that's coming out about dementia and kind of things that may be activating different parts of your brain with map reading and kind of spatial thinking is possibly a good idea.
Yeah, for sure.
But in terms of the here and now, maybe it's something more interesting to do. If you're used to running your 5K loop around the roads in the dark, maybe having a map can distract you a little bit from going for a run, give you something else to think about, and suddenly maybe you haven't run 5K, maybe you've run 8K and it's felt easier, potentially.
Yeah, I like that idea that you're sort of distracting from the distance with an extra challenge, and you might be able to find that you can either do a distance faster than you thought you imagined, or just go a bit further just because you have that distraction. I feel that's a sort of, there's too much focus perhaps on time and distance all the time, whereas a third element is quite a nice breaker of that sort of normal standard.
Yeah, everyone's chasing their Strava pace and distance and stuff, and maybe you want to chase how many checkpoints did I find today, or how many did I find really well, or I ran on a really new path in the forest today that I'd never been to, and that was really exciting.
Do you think that GPS watches, which are so front and center now with new runners and runners who've been running for a long time, you've got to have your watch, you've got to be able to record where you're running. Do you think that level of tech and that use of it has negated the need for map reading skills? Or the situation where a map and a compass are still absolutely needed? I mean, from obviously orienteering races through to sort of big ultra stuff where watches can run out of battery and all that sort of stuff. Do you think that map reading is probably a niche skill, but something that runners should consider still having?
I think it depends where you are. I think if you're out in the Lake District or kind of getting into that wild stuff, I think having an idea of where you are and how to get home is a really useful skill. But we're never going to get away now. We've got Google Maps everywhere. Like, no one's going to go back to road atlases to drive from one place to another.
I mean, when I first moved to London, I had a London A to Z.
Yeah.
I found it the other day. It was fantastic. I was just like looking through these old things. And I think that maps really have a certain charm to them. Topography looks incredible. You can, OS maps, you can print them out and have them on a wall and you can sort of view them like that. And I'm a big fan of the OS map app. I've got that and I use it a lot to sort of just try and discover a bit more of where I am, in that sort of sense that, bridleways and footpaths are mapped and you can get a bit more of a steer on where you're heading. How does it work when you're looking at these events and they're obviously, it's a set course, is it? 'Cause I'm sort of intrigued about the sort of sense of finding the best route within a sort of the parameters of the race. How does that work?
So the map is a sort of special map. It's more detailed than an OS map that people might be familiar with. And in theory, everything you need to know is on the map to make the best decision. So you get the checkpoint and the next checkpoint, and then you're looking at the different routes, or maybe that route is a bit more hilly, this is flatter but longer, and you sort of weigh it up in your mind and try and think what's the best option for me, if that answers the question.
No, it does, and I think it really then that plays more into the skill set, as you say. Faster on the road, I'll take the longer road route rather than the scramble off road, because I know that I'll be faster than the person who thrives in the mud, that sort of stuff. Would you have any general advice then for sort of beginners who are looking into orienteering and navigation and map use and all those sorts of things? Is it go and find a club, get a map, go for a walk? What's the sort of best advice?
I mean, navigation is a kind of horrible sport because, and I mean this in the best possible way, but when you get lost or you do navigation badly, you then have to find yourself. It's not like, if we take the football example, someone passes you the ball and you do a bad pass, you get the ball again in 10 seconds. With navigation, you're then stuck in the forest somewhere, which is not a good experience. So highly recommend going to a club, find someone who knows what they're talking about, can do mapping, and you find that in a club. Go on the British Orienteering website. But the tips to people who maybe just want to go out and try it is, a map is art. And that means that the most important thing you have to do is you have to line it up with the world. Otherwise, it's simply a piece of paper with some pretty pictures on. And you can line it up with a compass. Or if you don't have a compass, you've got to use big features. So, there's a big hill over there, or St. Paul's Cathedral is over in that direction. Turn the map around, match it up with reality. And
there's been a real uptake in, this unsanctioned races where the sort of urban environment is being used as these sort of, which is classic orienteering sort of repackaged. Have you seen a sort of, that's obviously just a great thing that's happening for orienteering as a sport, I guess, if people discover it that way. Or is it sort of taking orienteering and sort of spinning it? I think they've been very smart, and I heard your podcast episode about this. Orienteering is not cool. People have bad experiences from when they were at school or in the Scouts of backpacks on and going for a trek around the park and it just not being fun. But you get a mass start in a pub, it's exciting, social media's there, cool videos clipped together, and suddenly it's really exciting to go and find some stuff in the forest. I think that explorer, everyone wants to be an explorer, everyone loves finding things. Whether you call it orienteering or you call it an unsanctioned race on the edge of society, it's sort of the same thing. So I would say to people that you come and try orienteering. Okay, bring your mates, do a course, maybe start at the same time, treat it a bit like you've been treating these unsanctioned races, and just have a go with your friends. How did you get into it, Ralph? What was the start point for you?
So my parents were doing the sport. So it was our family activity that they'd drive to the race and they take me. And that's what is really good about orienteering, is there is a course for my parents to do, and then there's a course that's the right level for me as a child to do at the same time. So the parents are not driving them to football again, standing on the touchline watching their child play. They also get to go out and have fun and then come back, and then kind of everyone can talk about, oh, how did you do? Oh, I had a really bad day, I got so lost, but it was so fun, or something like that.
Yeah, that was looking at the sort of research and before I spoke to you, the main thing that jumped out at me was like, yes, I want to go and do this, but also this was the fact that like, wow, this is something I can take my kids to. Like, this was straight away more of a sort of inclusive package of just like, as you say, there's something for them to do, or the course is a 2K or whatever it is, and that's super, like, kids can handle that. Like, it's that there's a real element to it which makes it kind of as a gateway into running, perhaps, that people haven't thought about. Orienteering seems like a really good way of doing it. What about I mentioned your 31-minute 10K in the intro, and you said we need to talk about that. So what do we need to talk about that?
I would like to say that it should be faster,
right?
As all runners would say.
Yeah.
But because I've been focusing on orienteering, I haven't really had the chance to really put it down. Just as a reference, Matthias Kibberts, he's an orienteering runner from Switzerland. He won European champs last year, and he's got world champs gold medals as well. He's just run the Olympic standard for the marathon. So as to set a kind of level of where the top runners are at, it goes really quickly.
Is it a sort of slightly untalked about element that some elites are going through, you know, like mountain runners and people who are taking part in all these big, you know, ultras and the sort of, in the background, are they all orienteering, but like on the sly, keeping it secret?
Yeah, definitely. If you look at people who'd be interested in like trail running, fell running, mountain running, will probably, the names of British runners will be high up. Christian Jones is maybe someone that people will recognise the name of, and he's done a lot of orienteering, and now he's run for Britain on the track, 10,000 metres, had the Commonwealth Games standard for Wales, been doing the trail world champs and mountain running. People on the fell running scene in the Lake District will orienteers are generally at the top because they're good runners, and they're especially good when it comes to uneven terrain.
Yeah, it does feel like a skill set that is ultimately needed for those sort of big adventures, and I feel that perhaps it's something missing or less talked about in the modern era of running, especially as it's sort of grown in popularity. More and more people are taking to the trails and all those sorts of things. I think that perhaps considering doing a bit of orienteering just for your own sort of, well, not safety, that makes it sound very dramatic, but for your own competence, should we say, I went out and about, that feels like a good thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's scary. Navigation is scary because it's a skill that we don't use now. As we've said, Google Maps is there, but you might think it might be really fun. So why not just try it?
I mean, it's because of the crossover with things like fell running and just general exploration, and the fact that these sort of orienteering does come into effect when it comes to navigating unknown land. What's the sort of position on sort of access to land then when it comes to racing and orienteering and stuff like that? Because it's always very set places and things. You know, I feel like orienteering is one of those sort of gateways that should open up the countryside, but in fact we're always very limited by what we can access.
Good question. Complicated, I think, is the right answer. Scotland is better than England because of the Right to Roam Act. I think we're very grateful to landowners, but landowners are worried that lots of people are going to come and destroy their forest, ruin their things. I would say that because everyone's finding their own route, it's not like you've got 500 people running on the same trail. Everyone sort of spreads out in the forest, comes obviously together where there are controls. I don't think the erosion is, say, as bad as maybe it would be if you put up a new mountain bike trail or something. But yeah, it is always difficult having to ask permission, and farmers, worried about diseases, or now getting off track, but there are problems.
It's sort of, I think that the idea of orienteering has this sort of high bar of being able to suddenly discover much more of the world, which is exactly what will happen if you take it on and learn how to navigate around. But there's this parameter, this barrier that exists for basically anyone trying to access the countryside to a degree. But I feel like orienteers are probably the ones who are sitting there at the front going, wouldn't it be nice if we could just go through that field and it not being an option.
Yes, and going off the paths. I think paths are fine usually, but you want to go in the forest?
Yeah, dubious. What does the map look like, by the way? I want to get I mentioned sort of like plastic folders around your neck. It's not that sort of level of stuff. Is it just a little tiny map, big maps?
I know this is not good for podcast material, but here is
a laminated.
So it's maybe A4 paper. In Britain we often print on waterproof paper, so it's fine. Sometimes you get them in like a sealed plastic, very thin plastic, and of course I have props to demonstrate.
Nice. Like a file document that you'd find in an office. That's basically what it looks like. Yeah, it's very nerdy. The printing, what kind of printing it is, there are all kinds of possible things to lose yourself in. I bet. No, it's fascinating. Are watches banned? Are you allowed to have a GPS watch on you while you're doing it?
To not give a too nerdy answer.
No, come on, nerdy.
Okay.
Yeah.
They change the rules a lot. at the top. So at the top elite level, it's usually banned because they think, but no one at the top elite level is using their watch to navigate with. So it doesn't really give an advantage. If you go to your local orienteering race, wear your GPS watch. No one's going to complain. That's
good to know. I think that's where people might be slightly put off if they sort of arrive with their Garmin primed and ready to go and they go like, take that off immediately. Like, how dare you?
I think people would be disappointed with you if you were using it to navigate. Of
course.
With. But just to put it on Strava afterwards, fantastic.
Oh, good. Right. Ralph, thanks so much for joining and chatting about orienteering. It's something that I have always thought about doing and never have. So now I feel compelled to go and do some because I love a map, really do. Love like plotting routes for adventures and all that sort of stuff, but have never quite gone to the full extent of just that route plotting always ends up on a device, and maybe I need to just not do that bit and just go out and get a bit lost.
Wonderful. Looking forward to it. Maybe if I'm back in the country, I'll send you an email and try and persuade you to get out somewhere. I can give you some tips.
I'd love that. Not at your pace, though. It's too speedy for me, but that'd be fine.
Thanks.
Cheers, Ralph.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening to the Runners World podcast. You will hear again from us next week. If you haven't subscribed to the magazine, do so. Google Runners World UK subscription. Head to the Hearst magazine's website. You'll find all the information there. There might even be an introductory offer that you can get your hands on. Congratulations, you've got yourself a bargain. If you haven't subscribed to this podcast, please do that too. And you'll hear from us next week.